Hey, good morning. It's John Wilkins, your core coach, and we're doing a podcast for YouTube. And right on my left here, I have one of my good friends, my cardiologist, and my client.
Exactly.
This is Dr. Masci. Dr. Masci, tell a little bit about
Sure.
yourself.
Hi, I'm Bob Masci. I'm a cardiologist. I'm 68 years old. I've probably been working out for about 55 years or so,
Mm-hmm.
since I've been about 13. Grew up in Bergen County, played high school football and baseball, and then in college at Johns Hopkins, I was a wrestler, wrestled in the 150-pound weight class. And I'd like to say I'm usually between 155 and 158
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so on, trying to stay fit all these years. I went to Rutgers Med School, did all my medical training in the Navy. Between my internship and residency, I worked as an undersea medical officer and got to train with some of the Navy SEALs. That was very exciting and
Awesome.
a great experience. And I've been graduated, I graduated med school in 83. So I've been a physician now for over 40 years and a cardiologist for over 30 years. Practice locally here in Newton County with privileges, Sussex County, with privileges of Newton Medical Center and Morristown Medical Center. My practice is Sussex Cardiology, part of the medical group in New Jersey.
All
So
right.
there you go.
Awesome, awesome. That's a big list. I
Yeah.
like it. I like it. I actually didn't know all of that. It's funny. You meet somebody and you know them, and you just don't really know all the details. So
Sure.
that's great. I appreciate that. So the reason why I have you on here is because there's a big disconnect in the medical world, the training world, and we're trying to just kind of fuse that together. So a couple weeks ago, I had a physical therapist on, and we talked about things like I just finished an injury. Now I'm going back into the gym, and what do you do? So a lot of the guys go back into the gym and they just go back to what they were doing that hurt them in the first place. They didn't take any of those
Yeah.
exercise that the physical therapy gave them and made them into traditional exercise that they use in the gym. You know, so what I want to do with you is I want to talk about anaerobic. I want to talk about strength training, and I want to talk about anything you want to do. I got 5 questions here, and I want to just talk about that stuff. And I just want people to be informed because they're not informed.
No, I would agree. I think there is a big disconnect, and anaerobic exercise is very, very important.
Hmm.
And one of the components of that is weight resistance training, plyometrics, core work, and that's all stuff that you really focus on
Right.
in your workouts. Just so people understand the difference between anaerobic and aerobic exercise. Aerobic exercise is usually a lower intensity exercise, such as jogging, walking briskly, swimming, where you're actually using oxygen to create energy
Right.
through something called ATP, which is how your body stores energy. Anaerobic activity, you actually don't use oxygen, and anaerobic means without oxygen.
Hmm.
You don't use oxygen, and your muscles just use the glucose and glycogen that's stored in your muscles.
Mm.
And when they do that, when you don't use oxygen, you generate lactic acid. And
Mm.
lactic acid is what gives you that burn um, in the muscles. So that's
Right.
the major difference. Most high intensity training is anaerobic. And believe it or not, most high end sports activities are anaerobic as
Right.
well
Right.
because
Right.
they're bursts of energy for a short time,
Hmm.
such as a football player, a running back, right? He's
Yeah.
in the huddle, then he gets the ball and runs,
And
and then the
even like
next
a
play,
golf swing, even like
everything.
cheerleading. And what they do is like I remember like I used to train these boxers in the morning. The guy would go out jogging for 5 miles. And I said to him, how does that help you? He goes, I need to be able to go 10 rounds. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. No, it is a big misconception. Now, not to say that aerobic training, so-called cardio training, is not good for you. There are some
Yeah.
benefits, and over the years we've learned, and I've actually run a couple of marathons years ago. But what we've learned is that really once you get around the 20-mile a week, whether that be walking or running, and the equivalent probably cycling is around 40 miles. Longer than that, you're really not, the curve sort of flattens out.
Mm.
And there's probably very little more benefit to your cardiorespiratory system at that point. Now you can improve your distances and your times.
Right.
You might lose some more weight, but in the long run, unfortunately, you actually start to break down muscle.
Yes.
And we can talk a little bit later about the
Mm-hmm.
importance
Mm-hmm.
of muscle mass, strength, and longevity.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I always get is so we train with the finisher bar, and I kind of created this thing. I got the patent on it, and I put everybody on it because the exercise that we do with this finisher bar are more related to what we do in life, right? So you take like a repetition, right? So I'm gonna go to the grocery store. I'm gonna get a couple gallons of water, and I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna put them down. I'm gonna stand back up. I'm gonna put them back down. I'm gonna stand back up, and I'm put them back down. No, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up those gallons, and I have to walk with them somewhere. You know, I have to might climb some stairs. But we train in repetitions all the time. We don't train time under tension.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's what's one of the huge benefits of the finisher is it's time under tension the whole time you're on it.
Right.
You have muscle contraction. You're getting anaerobic every single second you're on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you from experience, a minute or two on this thing is really gets your heart rate up and
Yeah.
and really does a lot of good for you. And again, it's these short bursts of energy because in real life, as you pointed out, everything we do is a quick burst of energy and then sort of a break.
Right.
The only time we have sustained low to moderate levels is when we're running 5 miles, or
Mm-hmm.
we're riding our bike for 30
Right.
or 40 minutes, or swimming 500 yards. But that's not really everyday life.
Right. Right. Now, question for you. I always had this question. I think I know the answer, but you take that 20-mile bike ride, and if it's flat, then it's more aerobic. As soon as I climb up a hill, it switches to anaerobic.
Exactly. And if you ride a bike in Sussex County at least, or even if you go for a brisk walk, it's almost impossible not to get some anaerobic training
Yeah.
because we have a lot of hills and a lot of ups and downs. So you hit it right on the head. It's a blend of both. And I think, that's a great way for anyone, whether you're cycling or even briskly walking, to get a combination of the two.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty efficient. And, I would say, I'd recommend probably 3 days a week of that sort of activity, and then at least 2, if not 3 days of something like what we do here in your gym and your program, with the finisher.
Yeah. Yeah. I have another question. When I go for a hike and I hike uphill, when I look at my whoop, when I go downhill, I'm actually exerting more energy. Is that because of fear, or is that
No,
because
no, I think what people don't realize when you're going downhill, you're controlling your descent.
Mm-hmm.
And actually,
Like deceleration?
yes, in
Yeah.
distance. I mean, every time you take a step down, you're using your quads to sort of so these are the biggest muscles in your body. So you're using a lot of energy. You
Okay.
actually can use more energy, going downhill. And I can tell you from experience years ago running marathons, it's usually the day after you really have trouble walking down the
Yes.
stairs,
Right.
not up the stairs.
Right.
Because
Right.
you really use those
Mm-hmm.
muscles a lot. But one of the things with this sort of training, this anaerobic training, this core training, it really has many benefits to the cardiovascular system. It's been shown to lower all-cause mortality.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely been correlated with longevity. Just grip strength alone
Right.
is a great surrogate for longevity. The other thing is thigh circumference. Now, when we're talking about muscle, not
Right.
but that's another great marker. The more muscles you have, the more muscle mass you have, the more you can buffer carbohydrates and blood sugar.
Right.
And it's sort of a sink for your blood sugar. And if we think about one of the biggest health problems, kind of runs neck and neck with obesity, and obesity is one of the risk factors, is type 2 diabetes. And in the United States, probably the percentage of diabetic folks are about 12-13%, and over 90% of those are type 2 diabetes.
Right.
So this is basically they're overweight, they have more fat than muscle. And as we all age, our pancreas, which makes insulin, starts to slow down a bit
Right.
and makes less and less insulin. And the more fat you have, the more insulin you need to control your blood sugar.
Right.
The more muscle, the less you have. The other advantage of having more muscle, and I'm preaching to the choir here, you burn a lot more calories at rest.
Right. Right. Right.
So again, I mean, and the number one risk factor for cardiovascular disease, or probably the most potent risk factor, is diabetes.
Right.
So this has also lowers blood pressure,
Mm-hmm.
lowers CRP, that's C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation in our body.
Right. Right.
And inflammation is sort of a common cause for all cancers
Mm-hmm.
and also for vascular disease.
Mm.
So, and then the other thing, and tell me if you want me to stop talking, but I get excited about this. I tell my patients
Yeah.
all the time that if you do the work, you put the work in, I can't guarantee you're going to live longer.
Right.
Anything
Right.
can happen, but you're going to markedly lower your risks of all these chronic diseases. But even more importantly, it's going to guarantee you better quality of life as you age.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't blame you. Damn good deal.
And I think that's
Yep.
really what it's about.
And you sit there and you go to the grocery store and I could actually see people that I look at every day, all day long, and the norm is injury, the norm is limping, the norm is kyphosis, the norm is obesity, and I'm like, wow, what are we doing?
Yeah, no, a lot of people, and if you really, for all of us, once you get to about age 35 to 40, if you're not working out all the time and really making an effort, you're going to lose muscle mass. Actually, probably by age 26, 27, you start to lose about 1% a year of your
Right.
muscle mass.
Right.
And in although the cardio exercise, like we said, aerobic exercise has some benefits, if you're fortunate enough to live to 85, and I see 80-year-olds, 85-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, I had two 92-year-olds in the
Mm-hmm.
office. And the folks that are really doing well are the people that have kept fit the whole
Right.
time. Because, if you're fortunate enough to live that long, it doesn't matter if you can jog 5 miles or swim 500 yards. What matters is, can you get in and out of a car?
Yeah.
And this is the sort of work we do here.
Can you get out of bed?
Can you get out of bed?
Can you reach up in a cabinet and grab
Can
something?
you grab something? Can you get off the toilet?
Yeah.
No, I mean, these are all things that
Yeah.
have to really have a substantial impact on whether or not you can live independently.
Yeah.
So I just, I can't say enough. Every day in my office, I try to talk to patients.
Yeah.
I tell them a story. There's a gentleman when I was about 7 or 8 years old who it was a neighbor's father who came over from Italy, and he was about 82, I think, at that time. I was 8 or 9 years old. He was a mason.
Mhm.
He'd worked his whole
Yeah.
life in Italy, and he wore one of those they call them guinea t-shirts.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a very robust guy, and when he shook my hand, it was almost
Yeah.
like you felt you're going to go down to the ground.
Yes.
And it's because he didn't have the finisher,
Right.
but essentially
He did have the finisher.
in what he
Yeah.
was doing
Yeah.
every day
Yeah.
in
And
his
it's
life.
all functional training.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's doing it all day long.
Right. And there's so few of us nowadays in modern society that are doing that sort of work anymore.
Yeah. Well, the listeners need to hear 5 questions, right?
Right.
So I sent you about 20 questions and you picked out the ones that, and I agree with you on this one. Which ones are like good for the average, ordinary person to be able to pick this up and learn from it, and then maybe afterwards do a little bit more research, So the first question is, we already talked about it, but I'm going to read it anyway. What is anaerobic exercise and how does it differ from aerobic?
Okay, so as I just go over it again quickly, aerobic exercise means you're utilizing oxygen to generate energy. And those are the sort of exercises where we talk about having a heart rate goal of about 70 to 85%,
Okay.
your maximum predicted heart rate, which is really an estimate.
Mhm.
I always tell people your heart's not going to blow up if you go over that number. It's 220 minus your age. But I'll give you a hint that I think is a much easier way to do it. You don't need to monitor your heart rate. If you just have a sense of trouble talking,
Right.
a little shortness of breath, if you can easily talk, you're not doing enough. If you can't talk, then you're getting into the high intensity
Right.
anaerobics.
Okay, that's a good one.
So it's easy. About the only time you really got to be crazy about the heart rate, if you're really seriously training or, for some event, or, you're a professional athlete, but for everyday people, you really don't need to be paying attention to that.
Right.
It's
Right.
just your perceived sense of
Okay.
exertion.
Okay. Good. Good. Excellent. So the second question is, can you explain physiologically the processes that occur during anaerobic exercise?
So during anaerobic exercise, your muscles are actually breaking down without getting into all of the biochemistry of it. They're just breaking down stored glucose in the muscle and getting all the energy from that. The mitochondria are
Mm,
the what we call organelles. They're the
the
little
powerhouse cells.
powerhouses.
Yes.
That's the word in the in your muscle cells
Mm-hmm.
that are utilizing this. As a result, again, lactic acid builds up.
Right.
Now, as you train more, your mitochondria become more efficient, and you also become more efficient at buffering the lactic acid,
Mm,
so you don't get that burn
right.
as quickly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
So, and it doesn't. So your blood, the pumping of your heart,
right.
and the exchange of oxygen is not as important in that anaerobic
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. Although you will begin to stimulate that as you work.
Right. And that's why the threshold needs to continue and getting better. And it kind of depends on your rest time afterwards. Like if I do something, one of my markers is I did this and it took me like 30 seconds to recover from it. The first time it took me a minute.
Right. So your cardiovascular system is getting more efficient, and you're getting better at buffering that lactic acid
Mm.
and clearing that from your
Hmm.
system.
And then the other thing I heard, I used to hear this in the gym a lot, and this is where I want, clarity is the oxygen is depleted, and then however long you recover is how the oxygen circulates through your body again, through
So
your blood.
probably the recovery has to do a lot with getting rid of the CO2.
Mm,
And that's probably and as a matter of just a good example, if you see people before a breath hold, let's say, if they want to, swim underwater or whatever, if you hyperventilate, you get rid of most of that carbon dioxide. And it's the buildup of carbon dioxide that gives you that sense of breathlessness. And
oh,
that builds up
gotcha.
more when you have a lot of lactic acid.
Right, right. Okay, okay, that's good. That was perfect. Um, okay, so that was the next question is, what are some specific benefits of strength training for cardiovascular patients or those at risk of heart disease?
Well,
And before you answer
sure.
that, I know you told me about a study and it went to, I believe, all cardiologists throughout the United States. It was a study of when people had heart trouble, um, congestive heart failure,
Yes.
right? And they was told to do like more of a HIT program as opposed to sitting around doing nothing.
Right.
And then we increased. Tell a little bit about
So,
that. With
so, so I think, there's congestive heart failure. There's basically two broad categories. One of them when the heart muscle is weakened. The other one is when the heart muscle is stiff and
mm,
doesn't relax as well. That's very common in folks with high blood pressure, folks with diabetes. Also, as we get older, our vasculature changes and we lose some of the elasticity. Just like you lose the elasticity in your lens of your eye. That's why you can't, if you wear reading glasses, because
right.
your lens isn't as flexible. And the way I explain it to my patients is it's like we had a thin wall balloon and a thick walled balloon. And if they're filled up with air and you let go of them, the air will rush out. But to blow them back up, it's a lot tougher to blow back up the one with the thicker wall.
Right,
And
right.
that's what happens. Now, if people, and half of the people in the United States, particularly elderly folks, more than half of them, their heart failure is from the stiff muscle. It's not weak, it just doesn't relax
Mm,
well. And it's been shown that exercise training actually will improve that function
mm,
and bring back some of that elasticity.
okay.
Furthermore, people will lose weight
Mm-hmm.
and all of these things. So it
Right.
can
So
have a
that
huge,
you have to work so hard anyway.
so in a sense, it's part of the contribution in that disease is being out of shape. And as a cardiologist, the people that I see that have this, what we call diastolic heart failure or heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, meaning the heart squeezes well, they're almost all obese
Right.
and they're all out of shape.
Yep.
I can't think of anyone I've seen who was physically fit that had that problem.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So,
That's great stuff, man. Excellent stuff. Our next question is, do you find strength training is often overlooked in discussions about overall fitness and health? And why do you think it might be that way?
Ab-
Because
Absolutely.
you're a different breed. I mean, most people
Yeah.
don't say go exercise. I know I come into your office and some of my markers are off, and you tell me to work harder. You'll say, okay, take this blood pressure
Yeah.
medication, and you'll give me a chance to go make a
Sure.
difference.
Sure. So I think, why that's been, I think weightlifting sort of, the Arnold Schwarzenegger sort of mystique, I think that sort of got people interested in it, but I think a lot of people think weightlifting is just about bodybuilding
Right.
and not about fitness.
All right. And what you look like.
Right, about what you look like. It's about what you feel like
Mm-hmm.
and what you can do and your quality of life. And some of the benefits of strength training, like we went over
Mm-hmm.
previously. I mean, lowering your risk of diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
lowering your risk of heart attack, lowering your risk of all-cause mortality,
Right. Right.
of everything. And I think it's just gotten a bad rap. There was that big, back in the what was it, the 70s, a big running craze, and
Mm-hmm.
people thought a lot about that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and the other benefit we haven't talked about, not directly the cardiovascular, but for all the women in the audience, weight resistance training can definitely slow the progression of osteoporosis,
Mm.
and in some people actually help deposit more bone mass.
Okay.
So
Right.
it's just as important in women as in men, and
Mm-hmm.
no doubt.
Right.
But
And
again, it's been overlooked. I think people think of it as bodybuilding, which that's not what this is
right.
about.
Right. 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 And that's what is actually being shown. I had a woman here the other day, and I said, we're getting ready to do some planks and reverse planks and things like that. And she's like, I don't want to get big and muscular. I said, well, where did you see that? Do you have friends that are big and muscular? No, I see it on TV. So she couldn't tell the difference between what she was going to do
Right,
and what she's afraid of, you
right.
know? So I think in all the advertising, when you see these big bodybuilders on stage and, in some commercial, you'll see, or some ad, you got to show the fit
Well,
person,
right,
but
right.
95% of the people are not like that.
No, and well, the only way that women develop huge muscles is they have to take male hormones. If
Right.
they're not taking male hormones, they're
Yeah.
not going to get those real bulky
Right.
muscles.
Right. 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 I know. I've battled it all the time. All right. So that was awesome. Last question. How does muscle strength impact balance and fall prevention in older adults?
I think that's very, very important.
Yeah.
So we have basically two types of muscle fibers: slow twitch and fast twitch muscle fibers. The slow twitch, excuse me, muscle fibers have to do more with sustained activity, like walking, a mile or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. The fast twitch have to do more with bursts of energy, strength, and quickness. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
they're called fast twitch. And as we get older, if we don't do weight resistance training, we don't do core training, we don't do this sort of work, we will begin to lose those fast twitch
Right.
fibers. And those fast twitch fibers are going to be the ones when you stumble on something or slip on the ice or forget that there was a curb there,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to allow you to react quickly
Right.
and stop yourself from falling.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know about the substantial impact on folks' health and longevity when there's a major fall or they fracture a hip when they're 70 or 80
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah.
And again, it's that, and I can tell you that with the training that I've done, with John and all and over the years, is that, I've felt myself slipping a couple times on the ice or whatever. You're able to react,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can sort of stop that fall.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so important.
And and what are the two things that you do, right, that a youngster would be doing, but you're still doing at 68? You're surfing
I'm
and
surfing,
water skiing,
water skiing. Yeah,
right?
yeah, and the only right, and I only started surfing when I was 62. So the only way I think you could start to do a demanding physical activity like that at an older age is because you got to be fit, you got to have
Yeah.
those fast twitch fibers, you have to have the endurance, you got to have the balance,
Yeah.
the
And the
core strength,
flexibility. I mean,
and
when you showed me how to get up
oh,
on the surfboard,
yes,
I was like,
pop up. Yeah.
I said, who gets in that low cross? I have college wrestlers that can't get in that position.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the things I think with John's training programs, it's even helped me progress a lot more in my flexibility. And
Hmm.
I've been training with John for about 3 years, and I can tell you, my surfing pop up is a lot better, a lot
Yeah,
smoother,
yeah.
because John does a lot of muscular stretching where it's under tension,
Hmm.
and it's an exercise as well. And I think it's been pretty well proven that stretching under tension, what we call eccentric
Right.
muscle contractions, is a lot better for flexibility than static
Static
stretching.
stretching. Yeah,
Static
yeah.
stretching you might consider as a warm up,
Hmm.
to get things moving. But if you really want to improve your flexibility, the other advantage of this, a lot of the stuff we do with John is in this eccentric muscle loading. These are positions you might find yourself in doing
Right,
an active sport.
right,
And if you've
right.
never been there before and the muscle's
Mm-mm,
never been stretched,
mm-mm,
the ligaments haven't been
mm-mm.
strengthened, that's when you're going to have an injury.
Yep, slip
So
and
this,
fall, older people.
right.
My mom slipped and fell in November 72, right? Couldn't get up. She tripped getting into the shower, and her lip on her shower is about that big. She slipped and fell, couldn't get out.
Uh,
My nephew couldn't pick her up, so they called the ambulance. They came and got her. She died February 17th.
right, I remember
So,
that.
I mean,
Yeah,
just in that little bit of
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. No, it really those fall. It's in people in their later 70s and 80s, these falls have just such a substantial impact
Yeah,
on their longevity and their quality of life if they recover. And it's not to say that these things are going to prevent everything from ever happening. No, but it's really going to it's going to
yeah.
lower the risk. And I can tell you, I had my left hip replaced last June. I had arthritis in that hip, and I can tell you that with the work I did with John before and after, within 3 months I was back surfing again.
Yeah, right, right, right. And the scary thing is, even thinking about it, because I'm 56, and throughout my entire life, I've been athletic, still athletic. And I thought to myself, just I touch on a little bit, I say to myself, man, it was almost like my mom had, when she fell and couldn't get up, it was like somebody tied her arms and tied her legs because you can't get up when you're bound like that, but just it's actually your muscles not working.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A very simple thing to do is, and it's a great way to work all those muscles, is just to sit down on the floor with your legs crossed and practice getting up without using your hands at all.
Yeah, yeah,
And that works flexibility in all those muscles. And
yeah.
it's a great thing, and do it both ways. So the one time you bring your right leg forward first and the other left,
Mm-hmm.
but it's that sort of thing where,
Mm-hmm.
and the other thing, one of the points that people don't realize, if you fall and you're stuck, you can't get on. If you're laying on the floor on one side for sometimes it's 12 hours, 24
Yeah,
hours before somebody
yeah.
comes to help you. What happens is your muscles start to break down from the pressure from lying on that side. You develop something called rhabdomyolysis,
Mm,
and that ends up leading to kidney failure.
right.
So it's a very slippery slope,
Yeah,
so to
yeah,
speak.
yeah. Now, one last question. This is
Sure.
my personal question. Um, in your office, when you see, patients that are out of shape, obese, what is the feedback you get from them when you talk about this stuff with them? Oh, it's over for me. What are they saying?
Well, I think it all matters on who they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, some of the people, I've had a few people that have really made a major difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I could say there were more,
Mm-hmm.
people like that. I think, unfortunately, a lot of folks there think, well, I'm 50 years old. My waist size now should be a 40, and
Yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean. And so I'm going to have diabetes. I'm going to,
And
I
they
don't
just
care.
give in.
That's the point. Now, again, I try to inspire them all, and
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's some that I sort of convince and convert,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately, I think there's just a lot of
Said
people out there.
it's hard to
I
go
like
through any transformation.
right. And I like to think that, at least with myself, I can be a role model for them, and I practice what I preach.
Right.
And
they
I'm
can't
hoping,
use the age excuse with you.
exactly. No,
'Cause
no.
I remember one guy. I was at the Pentagon like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and I had one big guy there, and he was just like, "You know how old I am?" Because he couldn't do any of the stuff I showed him. So when you get to my age, I said, "Well, how old are you?" He said, "I'm 56." I said, "So am I." And he was like,
Right.
I said, "So I know you're getting lunch right now, but after lunch, come back over here." He never came back
Yeah.
because he
Yeah.
couldn't
No.
use the excuse.
Sure. No, exactly. And you're never too old. And there have been studies that have been done, literally in nursing homes,
Yeah.
with patients, and these are patients in their later 80s, and you can build muscle mass
Yep.
and improve
Yep.
their quality of life at really any age.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, this is crazy. Well, I'm gonna have you on again. All right.
yeah, I'd love to do that.
And
Anytime.
it was great. Great information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
John.
God
Thank
bless
you for
you.
what you've done for me
You're
as
welcome.
well.
You're welcome. And I'm telling you, this was amazing. This was amazing. We've gotten deep, but this was deep. It was nice.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. Thanks for your time. I know you're busy.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank everyone out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.